Yeah, this talk is a combination of folk music and computer science, so there's something, I'd like to think there's something to disappoint everybody in this one. So there's a really popular, widespread idea that musical instruments would be able to tell us fantastic stories if only they could talk. And you'll find this in the literature. I don't know if you have read Annie Proulx's Accordion Crimes, a fantastic novel. Seen the film The Red Violin, perhaps? And these are narratives where instruments are passed among players over time between generations, and they tell stories and they have agency in their lives. And if you speak to perhaps more everyday musicians, probably anyone who plays guitar, they'll be able to tell you a story about their instrument, or an instrument, perhaps the one they've got right now, perhaps the first instrument they ever owned, perhaps one they regret selling or regret buying, but they for sure will have a story about their instrument. And the industry recognises this, and it trades on it in interesting ways. I mean, you can buy a celebrity-endorsed musical instrument, and Eric Clapton apparently designed, and you can buy that because you're buying into some of the story behind that guitar. Or you can buy a new Fender or Gibson, and you can spend an extra grand or so, and in the custom shop they will relic it for you. They will trash it in the factory, burn it and hit it with hammers. And they'll do that on the basis of the guitar having a persona, a fictional character who might have played it, or a life it might have had. Was it a road warrior? Or was it discovered in a cupboard, unplayed? And this is serious stuff, unplayed for years but with the paint faded. And what they're trying to do is give you a story, to get you to invest a story in the instrument, and for good reasons. So we set out on a research project about 8-9 years ago, a number of us at the computer science department at the university, to sort of take that idea but run with it from the start and say, well, could we make an instrument that would capture and tell its life story? And somehow would, if you like, in my view, more genuinely do that. It would capture and tell the stories of actually where it had been and who had played it, and we'd see what happened. And that's the guitar we have here. It's called the Carolan Guitar, and it's in some ways a regular acoustic guitar. And in that spirit, I wonder if I should just play it quickly for you. Just, you know, it's a guitar, it needs playing, and then we'll talk a bit more about some of the ideas and the tech behind it. So that was a little piece of music. That's plenty. That was a piece of music with the singularly uninspiring title of number 164. But it was written by a singularly inspiring character called Turlough O'Carolan. And Turlough O'Carolan was an Irish bard, a composer of tunes, a teller of stories, who travelled around Ireland at the turn of the 18th century, staying in the homes of rich patrons, and who transmitted knowledge and stories through the oral tradition, the sort of Celtic oral tradition. And so, firstly, I've spent a lifetime trying to figure out that music, as many guitarists do, and trying to work out how to play it. so it means a lot to me personally. But also it seemed like a great inspiration for a guitar that would do the same. So we adopted Carolan's name, hence the Carolan Guitar, but you may have spotted we also adopted a Celtic theming to the instrument itself. So it's decorated with Celtic knotwork that's inlaid into its body. You can see on the front and the sound hole on the top and on the back and the headstock and pretty all over, sort of liberally decorated. And the first story we set out to capture was, I suppose, the making of the guitar, the concept and the making. That's the first story you want to know about. So I'll see if I can kind of condense that story a little bit, with a bit of luck. We might be able to find a bit of a video to show you that just summarises how Carolan was made. Oh, too many cables. Yeah, music by Steve Hicks, Leicester-based guitarist. See him if you get the chance, it's fantastic. Early designs and parts of that. It's made from a recycled wardrobe. Bits of it, the neck is mahogany. I don't know the history of the wardrobe, and I wish I did, but yeah. Guitar maker who made it. And we did do a bit of computer stuff, laser etched the patterns on the front. This is me and Adrian, who's in the room somewhere. Adrian, give us a shout. Hey, there he is, looking nervously into the CNC machine. It's quite an expensive piece of wood. It's a one-shot deal. If there'd been an earthquake in Nottingham at that moment, it would have come out looking very, very different, I'll tell you. Has to be finished by hand, so Nick's putting all the kind of mahogany in the front and sanding it down. Traditional lutherie. And there it is, playing its first ever song. So Nick records the first song, and we've got that on video the first time that anyone had heard its voice. So yeah, that's a sort of piece of documentation that I guess it'd be nice to get with any instrument to know a bit about exactly how it was kind of made. But that was really the start of the story, because after that we then released Carolan into the world as what we would call in our research area a technology probe. We sent it out into the world to learn about tech research, and that's one way we do research in our discipline. And it's shepherded by us, spent the last 8 years really travelling around gathering stories. And what kind of stories has it gathered? It's gathered stories of everyday musicians. It's been resident of the local folk club, and people have taken it home and lived with it for a few weeks and recorded their repertoire on it, or it's evoked stories of instruments they had owned in the past. We've been lucky that it's been played by a few professionals. Fantastic sort of jazz guitarist, Lulo Reinhardt played it, Django Reinhardt's great-grandson. Tim Eady took it on stage and performed with it. So it's appeared on an album, it's been to real-world recording studios. It's had quite a busy life as guitars go, to be honest. That's all nice for me, isn't it? What we did was we captured this information and we then kept it as a digital footprint and a digital identity for the object. Now, you may be familiar with this idea that we, people, increasingly have digital identities and digital footprints. We're all living with those, and we talk about ourselves incessantly on social media, and it's all recorded for future generations to marvel at. Well, the same is true of this guitar, and perhaps of many objects. They also have digital footprints as digital technologies are built into them. You'll find Carolan's at carolanguitar.com, at least the public-facing bit. There's a series of blog posts that tell you the stories about where it's been. So the guitar really comes in two parts, I suppose. There's a physical guitar, what you'd normally think of as being a guitar, But then there is this digital identity, its history, and maybe that's really what the guitar is. I mean, if it got trashed tomorrow, I could make another one like it, or Nick could, and it would be the same, wouldn't it? As long as it had its history attached to it, it'd be the same object, I think. What does it mean to have its history attached to it? Well, this is where the digital technologies come in. So it didn't feel like enough to have an object and a blog. We wanted somehow to be able to invoke the stories when the object was to hand. So the knotwork is a bit like QR codes. They're called art codes, and you can scan them with a phone. And you might have noticed I was doing that just now. I've got my phone on stage. And scanning these different decorative patterns starts to invoke stories. It goes back to its digital identity, and it pulls out some stories that we might want to know about. So yeah, what have we got? On the back we've got some kind of story about art codes there. I'm just scanning the code on the back. On the top, fancy a jam. That sounds like a dangerous business, I don't think we'll do that. So yes, with the object to hand, in use, in a situation, I can start to think about what stories it would tell me in the moment. And I can set it up, of course, to tell different stories in different moments. So actually, let's take a look at one of those. Let's talk about the art codes technology a bit more, the digital bit. I said they're like QR codes. They are in a way that you scan them and they take you to a website. What's nice about them is they can have a very aesthetic look. And what's even nicer is you can learn to draw them for yourselves. There's a simple set of drawing rules to draw an art code. It just uses topology, for those of you who are mathematically minded. It embeds information, numbers, into the topology of an image. What do I mean by that? Well, luckily, I have a video to explain it. Where did it go? Oh yes, I seem to remember. It's on the back. An art code is a way of drawing a number. Let's see an example. Let's take the number 1, 1, 2, 4, 4. I start off by drawing my first digit. It's this enclosed region. Inside it, I put a single free-floating blob to represent the value 1. You can see it there near the top. You can ignore the other lines because they're attached to the edge of the region. That's just a bit of decoration. The number 1, yeah? 1 blob in 1 region. Next, I add another couple of digits. Here they are, 2 more enclosed regions. And I put 4 blobs in each to represent the numbers 4 and 4. And then I add 2 more. And inside these, I put 1 and 2 blobs. I can also add lots of extra lines as decoration, as long as they don't create any more regions. And there you have it. I've simply drawn the number 1, 1, 2, 4, 4. Now you can have as many regions as you like if you want longer numbers, or you can have as many blobs as you like if you want higher values. The regions and the blobs can be any shape that you want, and they can appear in any order on the page. And this gives you a huge amount of flexibility for how you turn a number into a drawing. Now a really skilled artist can learn how to hide these numbers within much more complex designs. Here's some lovely wallpaper that we had commissioned, and it's got art codes hidden right the way throughout its many panels. So, yeah, you can learn to draw them for yourself. Download the Art Codes app, a bit of technology made by the university, freely available. It's loads of fun. You can draw simple ones like my butterfly, but if you're a skilled graphic designer, once you've got the rules in your head, you can go crazy with it. And it's really hard to spot the art codes in that wallpaper. And honestly, it's hard to spot them in Carolan. Some of you will come up to me later on and say, where are the blobs and the regions? And I still can't kind of work it out, even though I've known several times, because Liz Giel, who did the graphic design, the Celtic knotwork, she just was so clever at hiding the digital stuff, the topology in the designs. But they are there, and that's why it scans. So where have we got to? We have a physical guitar, an instrument. It's collected stories by people blogging about it. Sometimes we put sensors inside it to see what would happen on cameras in all sorts of ways. And now I can connect the object in hand to the stories, and I can invoke them on stage. Why would you want to do it? That's the worst question that anyone ever asks academics. Why? Why do you don't know why we did it? Well, we think this could add value to objects in several ways. Thinking about guitars. Number one, provenance. Okay, yeah, provenance is being able to prove that a thing is what somebody says it is. You need to know about the provenance of guitars when you buy and sell them, for sure. You also need them if you want to take them abroad. Do you know guitars have to have passports? Are you aware of this? It's not just a Brexit thing, it's a CITES thing. CITES is the endangered species legislation that prevents the transport around the world of endangered species. Guitars are often made from endangered species, like Brazilian rosewood, for example, and you can't carry that across borders without permission and proper documentation. If you do, you're at risk of having your guitar confiscated and destroyed. Doesn't happen very often, the blind eye is mostly turned, but it has happened. So a guitar should have a passport showing its provenance. Utility. What kind of manual would a guitar come with that would help you know how to use it? Well, obviously it could come with lessons, so you could scan it, and your music teacher might have connected it to this week's lesson or whatever. That'd be great. Another kind of provenance is knowing how to record it. So when it went to real world studios, we had a very professional sound engineer who made it sound wonderful. And we wrote down all the microphones that we used and exactly where they were placed and what settings they had on the mixing desk, and we stored it all in Carolan's story. So now if I wanted to try and make my guitar that I've just bought sound like the way it was used in the studio, I'd have a better chance than just trying to figure it out at home. But I think the real reason for doing this goes back to the stuff I said about Fender and Gibson. It's really about personal meaning and about personal association, because the guitar's identity is somehow the sum of all the different identities of the people whose hands it's passed through, and everyone's invested something in it. You may not be that interested in guitars, that's okay. It may not take much of a leap of imagination to think that this applies to all sorts of objects. And there's a thing out there called the Internet of Things you've probably come across, and that's the idea in computer science that everything, all objects will be connected to the internet and digitally enabled, and that's what this guitar is. And one of the ways it can be digitally enabled is by having identity services. And if you're from the business school, what we've done is we've turned this guitar from being a product into a product service system. A bundle of goods and services that you get. That's what it is. And that's what, in my view, Fender should come and give us a huge amount of money so that all of our guitars come with digital identity services. You don't just buy a guitar, but you buy a service that stores and manages its identity for you. And that's what all objects would be like. Okay, well that's enough rambling. I did say that it was a bit useful. So let's have a look at one more use here. I said your guitar might recommend a tune. There was something called Fancy a Jam on the back, so let's end with a bit of a jam. There's our codes. Got to remember the right code, haven't you? You won't find it. Oh, is it going to scan? Yeah, so we'll go out with a bit of a jam. Got a close friend of mine to play the guitar. Another couple of traditional tunes. To do during lockdown, did they? You'll have a long couple of years at home. Thank you, it's quite enough jamming, I think. Thank you. Okay, well that's it for me. Happy to take questions or if you've got any time. Thanks.